Hello again. I'm Monica Pitts. Welcome to Marketing with Purpose. Today, with the help of Heather Dimmitt Fletcher, I am going to try to tackle this myth that events are all you need to market your nonprofit and that they're all you need to fundraise for your nonprofit. You see, I didn't actually realize that was a myth that I needed to help bust so people could effectively market their organizations. I did a call for ideas out on Facebook a few months ago, and I said, hey, does anybody know any great online fundraising ideas that they've seen recently? And Heather messaged me back and she said, Monica, events are not a fundraising plan. Events are not a marketing plan. And I said, okay, I mean, yes, you're right. And I clearly know this. I'm a marketer and I'm not an event planner. And I know that they're two separate things, right? But we both agree that events have a place in your marketing plan and in your development plan for your nonprofit. We believe that they have a time and a purpose, but they shouldn't be your only source of development and marketing. And what really drove me to reach out and contact Heather again to do this podcast is I kept hearing that same comment over and over again from other nonprofit leaders and professionals and consultants. They said, man, there's a lot of people that really just think all they have to do is have an event and everything's going to be okay. So I wanted Heather to come today and have this conversation with me, one, to bust the myth, but then also to answer my questions about what are other ways that you can raise money and how do you pick the right one for your organization. She's going to talk about the difference between a development plan and a marketing plan. And she's also going to tell us about how she gets feedback about her events so she can decide whether or not she's going to do them year after year or switch it up or maybe just change parts of her event to make it even more successful. So what am I waiting for? Let's get to it. You're on a mission and you just need more people to know about it. And whether you're brand new to marketing or a seasoned pro, we are all looking for answers to make marketing decisions with purpose. I'm Monica Pitts, a techie, crafty business owner, mom, and aerial dancer who solves communication challenges through technology. This podcast is all about digging in and going digital. I'll share my marketing know-how and business experience from almost 20 years of misadventures. I'll be your backup dancer so you can stop doubting and get moving towards marketing with purpose. I have a resource that I really think you might want to check out. It's my nonprofit marketing plan template. If you are feeling pulled in all directions or just trying to get from one social media post to the next, then this template is for you. If you are going to do what my friend Heather says needs to be done, which is have a separate marketing plan from your development plan, this template will help you through documenting your plan and save you time and give you control over your marketing. Plus, it lets you get back to doing what matters most, which is serving your mission. So remove the guesswork, get the guide that gives you a clear path, like a fill-in-the-blank workbook to document what you need in that marketing plan. Okay, with my public service announcement out of the way, let's get to Heather. I'm excited because I have an interview guest today. I have Heather Dimmitt Fletcher, and she's with Colibri, and she's been part of the nonprofit world for a really long time and recently broke out onto her own and is doing consulting with nonprofits. And the reason that I invited her on is because I put up a post earlier this summer and I asked for great online event ideas. And Heather immediately commented back, Monica, events are not a marketing plan. And at first I was like, no, they're not. I did not mean to imply that they were. And then I was like, okay, well, I'll just tell her no. And then I realized that after a few more other conversations with nonprofit professionals who were also kind of like feeling that same frustration that people felt like their events were actually their marketing plan, I was like, man, maybe we should have a conversation about this and kind of explore it a little bit more. So Heather, why don't you tell us your story and kind of explain how you got where you are right now?
Right. So I have worked in both the programming side of nonprofit nonprofits in education, like actually building the programs, building them up, promoting them. I've done fundraising, but then I've also had quite a bit of experience as an executive director and other leadership roles in nonprofits. And I have a lot of experience taking over struggling nonprofits or nonprofits that are trying to grow. And then when I leave them, leaving them with quite a bit of money sitting in reserves to where they can operate even without bringing in much more income for a year or so to make things happen, which especially in times like right now is really nice to have sitting there in the bank. Though a lot of nonprofits are having a great deal of success raising money right now. So, especially if you are an organization that in any way is involved in human services or helping people or providing services to people, if you aren't raising money right now, you need to be. And if you're struggling to be raising money right now, you need to look at what your overall fundraising and your development plan is, because that's where a lot of success is actually happening right now.
So we started our conversation by talking about the fact that you were calling me out and thinking that I thought that events were a marketing plan.
And I didn't really think
I mean, like,
that.
as a marketer, I do know that they're not, but they can be part of a marketing plan, right? I kind of wanted you to talk us through when's a good time to have an event, when's not, like, what are they good for? How do they fit into the bigger picture? I don't even know what question to start with. Just tell me everything.
Right. So I have to say this. When I saw the post, and I wasn't, it might have come out as I was trying to call you up, but it wasn't. But the thing about events is whenever somebody says, we need to raise some money, we need to do X, they almost always default to, we need to have an event. And events have a place and a purpose and a time and an impact, but events aren't the sole solution to when it comes to raising money. And so the thing about an event or all events is that they should be a part of your overall development mix, your overall fundraising mix. And so that means you need to have a development plan. You need to know, where is your income coming in from? Where of those areas could you grow? And you want to make sure you have a balanced portfolio in your development plan. Because if you're relying solely on events, and a lot of organizations saw that with what was happening with all the stay-at-home orders, and even now when a lot of people are afraid to be around a big group of people. Fundraising events are suffering right now, and they're having to pivot pretty quickly. And that's what you were trying to do, is to help people figure out how to pivot to online. And what I was actually meaning was saying that there might be some ways to be raising money right now other than trying to pivot your great big large in-person event to being an online event. So why do I say that events shouldn't be what you rely upon? Well, here's why. Events are extremely time intensive for staff and volunteers. Not only that, the ROI for events, a good event, you usually spend 35 to 50 cents for every dollar you will raise. And that may and or may not include staff time, depending upon which expert you're looking at as your measurement. And it definitely doesn't include volunteer time. When you start losing people being involved with your organization, especially volunteers, a lot of times it has to do with they're burned out from doing events for you. So that is the downside of events. When you compare that to something like an annual campaign that you're usually looking at spending 35 cents or less for every dollar you bring in, or a major gifts campaign or a capital campaign that you're looking at spending 5 to 25 cents for every dollar you bring in, you start seeing why events might not want to be where you focus a great deal of your time and effort on. That said, people then often sometimes say, yeah, but events are a great public facing piece, and that's how people find out about us, and it's how we communicate. And they're right. Events really are a great public facing piece, but that's where you go back to, and you're using your event for marketing purposes, and you need to figure out how your event fits into your marketing plan. And if your only marketing plan is to have an event, that's a problem, because it's the same kind of thing. You don't want your event to be the only public facing image of your organization, but you do want your event to fit in to what the public facing image of your organization is supposed to be. And that's why you need a marketing plan.
It all has to tie together. Really, it does.
does all have to tie together. And the funny thing is when you're creating these plans, when you're creating a strategic plan and you're creating a development plan and you're creating a marketing plan, it is funny how much it does all reference each other and how many times you're like, I feel like I just put these exact same 10 strategies over here in this plan. And you probably did, because you are pulling from each other and they do need to intermesh and intercoordinate.
When you're smaller, one of the coolest things about being a small business or a small organization is that a lot of the times the same person that does the marketing does the sales. And so then you have like this very cohesive message, like you know what's going on. I mean, hopefully, right? I guess it can be completely off base, but most of the time it's like all in the same vein. I really feel like there's a lot of times, especially as you get bigger, and then when you start dividing up responsibilities, the saddest thing is when, you know, the development is saying one thing and then marketing is saying another thing and they don't meet in the middle. It's like they lost the message, right? So
Right.
I mean, I tasked Stacy, who is like our head sales lady, with making an ebook for me, and I'm reading it and I'm like nodding my head. It's like I'm listening to a song. I'm like, this girl's so smart. Everything she says is so right. And then I realize it's because like I'm her marketer and she tells me all her stories and we're on the same page. And I'm like, this makes me feel so happy.
Right.
But they don't always, you know, coincide. So if you're not going to do events for all of your fundraising, like what else is there?
There's grant writing. There's contract for services. There is, as we were talking about, annual campaigns, which a lot of people do an end of year letter writing campaign, but there's a lot of people that also do a mid-year letter writing campaign. In fact, there's a great deal of research showing that because so many people are sending out letters in November and December, that a good time to send out letters may actually be in April or May, right after people have just paid their taxes. There is also what you call your major gifts, or you call a capital campaign. Capital campaigns are usually when you're looking to make a pretty significant large investment in either expanding the organization, whether it be expanding like a major new program expansion, or if it's new equipment, or if it's a new building, expansion of your building, something along those lines. Whereas major gifts is wherever you're spending some time really investing in select donors that you've picked out, that you're strategically going after them for them to give you a pretty significant and large gift. What a major gift may be to a nonprofit that's budget is $250,000 a year is going to be pretty different from what a major gift will be to a nonprofit whose budget's $5 million a year. So you sort of have to figure out who is your average donor? Like, what does your average donation look like? And that's where you figure out, okay, this is who our bread and butter people are. This is who we go after for our annual campaign. This is who we go after for our events. And then who are people who are giving at a much higher level than that?
So if I have a small nonprofit organization and I'm probably in this thought process that events are actually my fundraising and my marketing plan, is there a recipe that I could follow or a suggestion that you would have to take some of those different types of fundraising and put them, like, is there one that might be easier for me or better?
It depends. And I say that, and this is actually something I do consulting on. I help organizations look at where their money is coming and try to determine where the best place to go. And it really does vary. It varies based upon where your income's currently coming in and what you see most successful. And it also varies based upon the skill sets of your staff. If you don't have somebody on staff who's a pretty good writer and you don't have the funds to contract out for grant writing may not be the best place for you to go. So you just have to decide. Then when we're talking about major gifts, again, it's that you have to know who your average donor is, and then you have to know, do you have anybody giving above that level? The other thing is your board. Like, who is your board? Who can they connect you with? Who can they network with? But honestly, the worst thing that we can do, every board is always like, oh, call Oprah, call Bill Gates, call this, call that. The likelihood that you're going to get an extremely wealthy individual who's never heard of your small organization to make a super significant investment in your organization is extremely thin. I mean, if you do it, you're going down in the annals of nonprofit history because no one knows how to do that. But that is where your marketing becomes important. You need to develop a passionate follower group of people who are willing to be your advocates, who are willing to go out there and talk about you and say all these great things about you. Your board should be that. Your board should be advocates for your organization and spreading your message. But you also want to have volunteers that are doing that. You want to have just general people in the community who are advocates for you. And through that, you hopefully start meeting some individuals who are willing to make an investment in your organization. Yeah, events are a good place. I mean, events can be a good place to find those advocates and to find the potential for major donors too.
Yeah, I feel like they fit in because they're a good way to meet people.
Mhm.
What I feel like doesn't fit in is when people are doing the same events that everybody else does, but they don't really fit into that organization's like mission and purpose, right?
Right.
So, yeah, that is when it does concern me, is when basically people are doing events that don't really tie in, or they don't use their event to market. I think that they miss the mark when they have an event and they're not developing assets for their marketing at their event, or telling their story, or,
Right.
getting
That's
the
what I was getting ready
story.
to say. The biggest thing that drives me crazy when I go to fundraising events is when they never actually talk about what the mission, vision, or purpose of their organization is. If you are having a fundraising event, it needs to be tied to your mission, vision, and purpose. I mean, how do you have 100, 200, 500, 1,000 people in a room and never once talk about what it is that you do or why you do it? I
Mhm.
mean, you are missing a prime opportunity. And that is also donor cultivation and donor development, is to have that conversation with people, to tell them what you do. Along that same lines, though, you need to make sure what you're doing ties in with your mission and vision. And you also need to make sure that it doesn't exploit, especially if it's people, animals, whomever that you're providing services to, that it doesn't exploit them and it doesn't exploit their stories. We all see those commercials on TV, the Save the Children commercials or the Humane Society commercials that I have to turn the TV. It is a physical reaction that I have to those commercials. Those are exploitation. All intents
Mhm.
and purposes, those are exploiting the people that you want to be serving, the animals you want to be serving. And so what you want to do is you want to do it in a way that it is showing the strengths of who it is that you serve, or the strengths of your program. And instead of it being like, oh, we swooped in and saved these people and made their life so much better. Most people have some sort of resiliency or strength. If animals have lived in horrific conditions, the fact they're still alive shows resiliency and strength. So you want to showcase how your organization is building on those strengths. We're saying, we know they have these strengths. We know they have this. And so we want to help them develop greater resiliency, or we want to help them be in a better situation because they have strived so hard with what they have. And we want to help that be in a better place for them.
Yeah, every story needs like a beginning and a middle and an end. And I feel like if you're not hitting all the parts, you have the need, right? People need
Right.
you. And then you have the solution, and then you have the outcomes on the other side of it. And if you can share all of those things, like events are, a lot of them are like the perfect peer-to-peer,
Right.
because you have an advocate who's bringing in a bunch of people that know you, and then it's your opportunity to be like, here's a story for you.
Right.
And then those people want to see, oh, you're really helping and you made a difference. And that's why they want to latch on to your cause and work with you.
One of the other things that drives me crazy when I go to a fundraising event is if I'm really sitting there going, are they ever going to ask us to contribute? Like, there's all these great things going on, but are they going to ask us to contribute? Because if you don't ask, people will walk out without contributing. Like
Yeah, they
they
will.
don't know that they're supposed to contribute. That also goes back to what we were saying, is if you have an event that you're like, yeah, but it's great public exposure and it's this and that's fine. But then that's not a fundraising event. That is a marketing event. And you need to know that. And you need to know, how are you going to use that marketing event? And how are you going to find the right people to get there? So I am one of those people that has used a fundraising event as a marketing purpose to develop a new segment of donors. But you have to know your donor segments going into doing that. You have to know your marketing audience segments, and you have to know where to find them, how to find them, how to connect with them, and how to keep them, how to get them involved, and then how to keep them involved after that.
So give me an example. So of what you feel like a marketing event versus a fundraising event would be. Because I'm wondering, like, what's a 5K? Because to me, it's a marketing event. I mean, you can raise some money on your 5K, but it's not the same thing as like a gala where people are sitting there and or a luncheon where you're going to make that ask,
Right. So they're oftentimes referred to as fundraising or friend raising events. It's kind of
Okay.
the difference. So the fundraising event is more about communicating to people who you are and what you do. And it's that
Mhm.
initial soft touch of getting them involved and interested in you. I think a 5K is a good example. I mean, a lot of people who participate in 5Ks either because they're runners and that's what they like to do, or like my friends and I, we do it because we need to get out of the house because we're going crazy right now. So we do 5Ks. It's more of a fun thing. The investment, it's a pretty low bar investment to initially get people involved. There are some really successful high dollar making fun or 5Ks. There are a lot that aren't. It just depends on what your cost is and how low you can keep your cost for that event. But at the same time, you want it to be impactful. So if you're doing a 5K and you're doing it with the purpose of the person's going to get a t-shirt and they're going to get a water bottle and they're going to get a couple other things, and it's the cost of what you're giving out to people is around $15 per person, and the entry fee is only 20, 25, $30 to participate. That is not an event that you are doing really to make money off of.
Mm-mm.
That is an event that you're doing to get your name out there and to
Mhm.
make people walking down the street see a t-shirt that has your name on it and go, oh, what is that? What do they do? And potentially look it up. So it is important to know what the difference is between the two. It's also 5Ks are an extremely hard place to make an additional ask. So whereas a fundraiser, the point is they come in the door, you tell them your story, and then you have an opportunity to make an ask. Whereas something like a 5K, they pay their entry fee to be in the 5K, and then that's kind of it. You move on, and there
Mhm.
isn't a chance to do anything else. You may have games and things set up along the way that they can play that you make a little extra money on, but it's not based upon your mission and vision that you're doing that.
Since we said that fundraising events are not a marketing plan, would you
Mhm.
define for us what the difference between a fundraising plan or a development plan and a marketing plan are, in your opinion?
Ironically, those two are actually vastly different in the sense that a development plan is looking at what your income needs are going to be, what your income actually is now, segmenting that income out so you know where the money's coming from. What percentage is coming from individual donors? What percentage is coming from fundraising events? What percentage is coming from for capital needs? What percentage is coming from grants? What percentages is coming from contract from services? So you need to have that all separated out. You might also want to know sources, like even further in there of like what percentage of those are maybe government grants or contracts for services, what percentage are coming from private foundations, what percentage are coming. You just really, and you also want to know how long you're going to keep some of those, because a lot of times contracts for services are multi-year contracts. They're not just one-time things. Grants may also be multi-year, but they may also be something that you have to complete within 6 months, or you have to complete within 3 months,
Mm-hmm.
or they may be 5 years. So you really need to have a good idea of what that mix is. I then recommend going out and seeing how does that mix compare with comparable nonprofits like you. You
Mm-hmm.
can do a lot of research on Google and find out a lot about this. If you don't want to do it, get a hold of me, get a hold of another type of consultant, have us set with you, and we will help you go through that. Then you need to say, where are we at compared to what good metric is for where we should be? Do we have the staff? Do we have the resources to get ourselves to this good metric? And then if we do, let's go and do that. And then it has like the strategies of like, what do you want to do year over year? How much of this do you want to grow each year? Who's going to be responsible for doing it? Do you have an identified development person on staff who's doing it? Is it your executive director who's doing it? Is it a program lead who's doing it? Is it a board member who's doing it? That kind of thing. And then you want to make sure that you have planned out what's doing that. So that's your development plan. Whereas with your marketing plan is saying, who do we communicate with? Why do we communicate with them? How do we continue communicating with them or communicate better? And who are we missing that we should be communicating with? And how do we communicate with them? That's sort of where you see the difference.
And I feel like the overlap then is understanding, like, during your development conversations, all of the information that your marketer has about your target market and why they donate and what
Right,
they care about and who they are. So that way, and having your development person communicate it back to the marketer, because the marketer needs to hear those words so they can
right,
develop good marketing pieces, and they really work together. I mean, I've
right.
literally had clients who will be like, oh, well, such and so doesn't need to be in the meeting because he's in development. Well, luckily I knew such and so. And so I called him and I was like, I'm going to be in your conference room around 9 o'clock. I need you to walk in and get coffee and just sit down. Just sit
Right.
down. Don't leave.
I would
And he's like, hey, bring on it. Because I want to hear the conversations that he has with these people so that I can like advise them on what to do on their website. Because he's holding the golden egg, in my opinion, for marketing, you know?
Right. So thankfully, a lot of nonprofits have got a lot better about this, but a silo approach really does not work well. If you're putting together a marketing plan, you probably want to have your lead program person in there. You want to have your lead development person in there, and you want to have your lead marketing person in there. That's big enough if you're an organization that all three of those are different positions. They may not always be. Um, but you need to do that because you want to make sure that your program person who's probably most tied into the mission and vision, that they're communicating that and they're making sure that all the materials that are going out are communicating the mission and vision. Your marketing person is going to be your best person, ideally, to be able to be writing that copy, be able to be promoting that idea, the graphics that communicate that mission and vision. And then you have your development person, and your development person is going to be your person who says, so these are the donors that we look for, that we want to tap with these marketing pieces. But your
Mhm.
programming person is also going to be the one to be saying, these are who our volunteers look like if delivering your services relies upon volunteers, or these are who our clients look like. Because when you're the marketing person, you need to be able to be marketing both for those who need services, both for those who help support your services. I'm sorry, not just both, but all three, and for
Yeah.
those who actually financially donate to give to your services. So that marketing person cannot exist in a vacuum. They have to have the input of those other two sides to make it happen.
I totally agree. So, another question that I had is, we talked about how everybody's, development mix and marketing mix is going to be different. A lot of the times I have people ask me, do I need to do the same events year after year? Do I need to do the same fundraising asks year after year? Or can it or should it be different?
So here's what I have to say to that. If you're doing an event year after year and that event is growing year after year, you haven't saturated the market for that event. Keep doing it. If
Hmm.
you're doing an event year after year and it, stabilizes and it just kind of caps out, but it's staying there. Like it's always bringing in right about 100,000. Okay, that's your workhorse. Just keep it. Just keep it.
Hmm.
Unless that workhorse that you're bringing in 100,000 for is costing you 85,000 to do it,
Yeah.
and you might want to rethink it.
Yeah.
But just keep it. If it's a system you've got down good, do it. If you're doing an event and it's plummeting, that's what we like to call your dog or your problem child. You need to get rid of that event and do something different. The bad thing is that those of us working in nonprofits and even boards, sometimes we get bored and we're like, we are so tired of this event. It is boring and we're tired of doing it. And so we cut it. But we cut it without having a plan of what we're going to replace it with. And then suddenly that event that was just your like steady workhorse, just always brought in this money, we cut it. We're tired of it. It's $50,000. We're just tired of doing it. We're bored. We're going to find something else. But you haven't built or groomed something else up to replace that $50,000. You're going to be in trouble if you don't have a replacement for that kind of money.
Hmm.
So it's important that you can cut them, but make sure if you're cutting them, you have something to replace it. As far as should I always be doing something different, there is something to be said. If something's successful, and you probably want to give an event a couple years to see if it's going to catch on. It's like a business cycle. You'll usually find a business cycle you're looking at anywhere from 3 to 7 years, depending on what it is. Now, granted, if you lose your shirt completely the first year on the event, you probably want to come up with something else. Unless it's 2020, in which case all bets are off because this year Nothing's making sense.
Nobody knows.
Right. Typically, you're probably looking at wanting to do an event at least 2, if not 3 years, especially if that first year you do the event, you get really great feedback about people telling you it was a great event, but you just didn't make a lot of money at it. Then that's probably where you want to give it another year to see how can you expand it? How can you get those people who came before to get them to come back again? Because it's a lot easier to retain people than it is to recruit new people. But how can you get them, like, what can you do to encourage them to invite new people to come so you can bring new people in and work with them?
Well, and I think too, there's something to be said for the second time that you do anything,
Yes.
right? Because you just better know how to pull it off and what you need
Yeah.
to do. And if you did a good job of documenting it the first year, then when you do it the second year, you'll be able to rely on all those documents that you had built up and all the
Right.
processes you already have in place. So it shouldn't take you as long to produce the second year, but it's still going to take time for sure.
And realistically, I found it's usually about the 3rd or 4th year before you really see how truly successful an event has the potential to become. And I say that especially if you switch locations for any reason. If anything about year 2 or 3 is different from year 1, it's going to impact what the outcomes look like. And so you might need to move locations. I had one particular event that it did okay the first year, and then the second year, and I was like, do we do it again or do we cut it? But the feedback on it was great. We took it to a different location the 3rd year. It was fantastic. We took it to an even different location the 4th year, and it exploded the 4th year.
Wow.
And I mean, exploded in a good way. Made a great deal of money, really had great ROI, that kind of thing.
One of the things that I've heard you say over and over again is feedback. And
Yep.
I like that. So tell me how you get that feedback.
First of all, I'm going to tell you, if you have a great event, people are going to walk up and tell you. I can't tell you how many times after an event that I had people saying, this was such a good event. This was like they wanted to spend time talking. And so that's one measure. If you have people telling you how great your event is, that's it. The other measure is one, what are your metrics? What are your financial metrics? What are your number metrics? How many people are saying we want to come back again? That's another thing to look at, or we can't wait till you have this again. But you're going to hear feedback from the community. Your board members need to talk to the people that they brought. If you had any key people you knew who came, if your friends, your family, whomever came, if your staff had anybody like that, talk to your key volunteers who are part of putting the event together, who hopefully they were there and they brought people with them. The one thing you run into with that is don't get hung up on the 1 or 2 people who are going to complain. Because it's going to happen.
Those people. Why? Just be nice.
But listen to what the complaint is. Was it a valid complaint? If it was something like, we can't hear in the back, okay, that's something we can address. We can get different AV equipment for the next year. So that's an addressable one. But if it's a complaint like, I didn't like the brisket, I thought it wasn't, I'm so sorry. I'm so sorry to hear that. But thank you for your support. I mean, that kind of thing. Because there's some things you just can't fix. I had people complain because it was raining one time.
You can't control the weather, friends.
It was an inside event, but they got wet. It was a dressy inside event. They got wet walking into it. I mean, I can't help it. What do you want me to do? So listen to that feedback. And here's the other thing. Listen to it non-possessively of the event. And that is the hardest thing, because when you have spent, and if it's a big event, you have probably spent 6 months planning that event. And more than likely, the 2 weeks before that event, you weren't sleeping, you were barely eating, you didn't see your family, you didn't see your friends, because you were doing everything you had to do to do it. And your whole team was there doing it with you too. And everybody is exhausted, worn out. And so when somebody has a complaint, it's gonna be super hard to let go of it. And you have to let go of it. And I mean, it is hard, and no judgment here if you're like, I can't let go of that, but you have to find a way, because in my experience, so there's what's called like the law 3, and it's if 3 people complain about the same thing, that means it's a problem. But if 3 people don't complain about the same thing, It's okay. I mean, and if it's a complaint that's easily fixable, yes, do something about it. And actually, one of the complaints that you do often hear at events is often audio. It's something that people can't hear very well. So that's always just something, just the beginning, to check as best as you can. And it happens, and like your heart literally sinks when it happens because you're like, I know it's coming. I know it's coming.
Yeah. So I feel like we should wrap this up.
Yeah.
We should try to answer our question as succinctly as possible. Why fundraising events are not a marketing plan? Tell me.
Because marketing is meant to communicate your brand, get people's attention, and fundraising events are meant to bring in money.
Boom. So there are certain types of events that can be part of your marketing plan. And you said that those are like fundraising events, right?
Right.
And while you're hosting your fundraising events, don't forget about marketing while you're there, but also remember that the main purpose is fundraising.
Is bring in the money. That's really important. Yes.
You're like a CFO for nonprofits. You're like, give me the spreadsheet. I got this.
And you know what? It is all about the numbers. I mean, events are fun and they're super creative. And if you're a really creative person, and I am, you'll get really caught up in the details and wanting everybody to have a good, great, fun time. It's about the numbers. Like at the end of the day, you have to step away and look at those numbers. And that's probably also the other key difference is identify what you want out of that event. Like, do you want to make friends? Do you want to make money? Like, what do you want to do? You can't do both, but you can't do both as effectively. It has to have a focus of one or the other.
Yeah. And I do love what you said about the feedback. And I feel like what I've heard you say multiple times now is like, it's the feedback of the people, but then to like coming together after the event, this is what I'm hearing, and like just looking at it and seeing what could have been different, what could have been better, because I love the way you guys were like, we're just going to take this to a different location and a different location and a different location, because there was something about that wasn't working for you, whatever that was. And so just because you've always done it this way doesn't mean that that's the way it has to be done. And I feel like sometimes people get really tied into that.
Right. And so I'm just going to throw out a little plug here that my partner and I at Colibri Associates, we have put together a tool to help people analyze fundraising events. So if people are doing events and they want to reach out to us, we don't do it for free. It is one of our consulting services, but we can help people analyze their fundraising events, especially if they've done them for a couple of years. We can help them analyze and then give suggestions of what else they may look at doing to make events more impactful. And when it comes down to it, nonprofits can't operate on a strict business model, but nonprofits still have to operate with some sort of a business mindset of what do the numbers say about what we're doing, and go from there.
So tell people how to get a hold of you, Heather.
So people can go to my website. It's colibriassociates.com, and they can find my email there. It's heather@colibriassociates.com. Or they can also email me at Gmail, which is hdimitt@gmail.com. Colibri is KOLIBRI. And Colibri, in its various spellings, is a Latin language-based word for hummingbird. Hummingbirds have a huge meaning in my family and a history in my family. And so when my partner and I were talking about what kind of business we wanted to build, and we were talking about how we really wanted to like bring together the best experts to communicate information out to nonprofits and work with nonprofits, I said, well, the meaning of hummingbird is as communicators and messengers of goodwill and good messages. And he was like, okay, that's it. So our symbol is a hummingbird, and that's what Colibri means, is hummingbird.
Awesome. Well, thank you for your time today, Heather.
Thanks for having me, Monica.
Thank you so much for listening to this episode of Marketing with Purpose. Just a reminder, if you are on a path to making a marketing plan for your nonprofit, hop on over to mayecreate.com and remove the guesswork. Get my nonprofit marketing plan template. The guide will give you a clear path, like a fill-in-the-blank workbook, to document what you need in your marketing plan. And it also has time-saving tips for creating your plan and working it. So I'll see you over on mayecreate.com. And until next time, go forth and market with purpose.